Okay, good morning, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us today. I would like to welcome you to the session on Transformation Within Reach, Pathways to a More Sustainable World. This is part 2 of our 2-day meeting on COVID-19, from recovery to sustainability. Yesterday, we learned about the UN research roadmap to COVID-19 recovery. And if you missed it, you can have a look at it in the expo area where the recordings have been listed. But today we'll be looking at how bouncing forward to sustainability, and we'll be doing that together with our partners from the International Institute for Applied Systems Analysis, IIASA. A number of their colleagues will be joining us shortly. As said, I'm Charles Erkelens, Operations Director at IISC. And we can say that over the last 6 months, IISC and IIASA have brought together a large group of experts from all over the world through their IIASA-ISC consultative science platform. And today, we're happy to look at the results drawn on this combined strength and expertise of our 2 organizations to help find a way forward during the pandemic. So, as said, we will first have a session of around half an hour on the stage here, and then after that we'll allow you to go to the sessions where you can have a more specific dive into one of the 4 themes that we'll be treating there. But now I would like to, we will be hearing from our IIASA colleagues, Albert van Jaarsveld, who is the Director General. And later on, we'll also have Elena Srivastava, who's Deputy Director General for Science at IIASA, and Luis Gomez Echeverri, who is an Emeritus Research Scholar with the Directorate at IIASA. But I would like to start off with Albert. So Albert, please step forward, and I'd like to give you the floor.
Thank you very much, Charles, and from my side, a warm welcome to everybody, and good day to you wherever you may be. Thank you for joining us for this occasion on which we want to share with you the results from the consultative science platform between IIASA and the International Science Council. As Charles indicated, the work was carried out by over 200 international experts from 29 countries over the last 6 or 7 months. And we're delighted to share with you the summary as well as the 4 thematic reports during these different sessions over the 2-day period. So a hearty welcome from my side as Director General of IIASA, but also like to convey a warm word of welcome from Heide Hackman on behalf of the International Science Council. She unfortunately could not join us for today, but she wanted to convey good wishes to everybody in the process. So it's really important for us to use the momentum generated in the science system over the last couple of months, despite the terrible crisis that we're trying to overcome, to ensure that society uses the energy and the focus that has been achieved over the last couple of months to inject that momentum into achieving sustainability and achieving a more dignified future for humanity over the coming years. And I think the idea with these reports was really to focus us in terms of our joint efforts and engagements, and to ensure that these reports and the outcomes and suggestions here are put in the right hands so that policymakers can make decisions that will drive society to a better and a more sustainable future. So I look forward to hearing the results and the outcomes of the different reports today as well. And I hope you'll join us in participating in an active manner as far as these engagements are concerned. So, Charles, from my side, thank you very much for this opportunity, and back to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Albert, for your kind words and introduction. I think it's really great that we found that over these last 6 months, there were over 300 experts brought together by IIASA and ISC on the consultative platform. And they are from all different fields, but especially focused on 4 themes: governance, science systems, energy, and food resilience. And we'll be able to dive deeper into these 4 different areas at the sessions as indicated. And you'll be able to go to the breakout sessions after our presentation. But first of all, I'd like to invite Lena and Luis to take us through the synthesis report, the transformation within reach, and its key recommendations. Lena?
Thank you very much, Charles. It's a pleasure to be here and to be able to share the results of our work in these last few months. Can we move through the next slide, please? So just to give you a quick introduction to the initiative that we had and the reports that have come out from it, I'd like to start by acknowledging the large number of people who have been associated with this over the last several months. And these are listed here as part of groups. And I will, in the next slide, please, also share with you. Can I have the next slide, please? The fact that we have the Ban Ki-moon Center, Future Earth, the Earth League, and the Vienna Energy Forum, who have partnered us over the course of these few months. And in addition, in the next slide, you will see the members of our International Advisory Board. It was a very eminent board with His Excellency Ban Ki-moon as the patron of this initiative and some very eminent people, including Her Excellency Mary Robinson and the head of UNDP, Achim Steiner, Daya Reddy, who's president of ISC, and several other renowned people who have guided us through this particular exercise. Can I have the next one, please? So what is this initiative about? I think what we started doing way back in the month of May 2020, when we were just coming onto the COVID crisis and not knowing how it is going to roll out, we saw a small window of opportunity to achieve transformative changes. Some of you may have heard the head of WMO recently talk about the fact that we have a 1 in 5 chance of at least temporarily exceeding the 1.5 degrees Celsius target that we have in the Paris Agreement as soon as in 2024. And this COVID-19 crisis and the responses that we had to the crisis basically revealed to us that despite the fact that we do not seem to be on track, whether it is on climate change or SDGs, there is a latent transformative potential that exists in the world that needs to be tapped into and that can pull us back from the brink of some of the extreme events that we are looking at if we start crossing the thresholds that we have set for ourselves. It is also pointed out to us very clearly that we need to build a very strong resilience to the multitude of systemic shocks that we are already facing. I mean, there are the extreme weather events, and we have seen an unprecedented number in the year 2020. We have seen many events of social unrest that have also spilled across borders. And of course, COVID-19 that also brought to the fore the fact that challenges cannot be limited to specific geographies. So the transformative potential that we are talking about, the transformative green shoots, as we have called them, they hold some valuable lessons, which I think we need to be able to preserve. And this entire exercise is to see which are those winning green shoots that we can look at and that we can consider to be low-hanging fruit, where recovery packages can actually be used to drive this transformation towards a sustainable world. So can I have the next one, please? You already heard that we have 4 key themes around governance, science, energy, and food. What we did is, since we started in the month of May and there was very little evidence that was still available with us at that point in time, we gathered some of the best known thinkers in these spaces and organized 3 intensive representative consultations on each theme to identify and develop these game-changing transformative actions from each of the sectors. And these were participants that we had got from transdisciplinary communities, including the private sector, finance, NGOs, and so on. Can I have the next slide, please? So very quickly running you through the 8 key recommendations that we came out with in the synthesis report, which derives from all the 4 thematic reports, and you will see the linkages when you do listen to the thematic reports. But in case you're not able to join, which is highly unlikely, all the 4 events simultaneously, you will get a flavor of it in these key recommendations. So the very first key recommendation we have is that we urgently need to strengthen the knowledge base on and the preparedness for compound and systemic risks. I think this basically recognizes the fact that COVID-19, despite the fact that we had some forewarning and several other extreme events, caught us unprepared. And even if we are able to analyze compound disaster crises with high degrees of uncertainties, it can strengthen risk responsiveness by preemptively identifying resource mobilization needs and strengthening management structures so that we are better able to respond to the crises. We also need to be able to see that while disaster management institutions have been, these must be mandated and empowered to address compound and systemic risks systemically based on strong inputs from science. There was a very interesting study that was done in my country, India, in 5 states by the CDKN, and they concluded that, and I think this will hold true for a number of countries, to a large extent, the disaster management authorities only collect data after a disaster has happened. And the systematic collection of data on pre-disaster conditions would basically help them to measure the ability of states and countries to anticipate, absorb, and adapt to shocks and stresses. The current focus, which is only on response and relief, is totally inadequate for us as we are going forward in this highly risk-prone world that we are living in. We also highlighted the fact that agility, reliability, and relevance of science are key to effective resilience and responsiveness. And this, of course, is only possible if the research institutions that are involved in this kind of research are well endowed and well prepared, and that the research at the same time is concentrated not just in a few countries, but in all countries and several at the local level as well. We do believe that the capacity at the local level is critical, as it can produce the evidence which is necessary to develop effective context-specific strategies to mitigate risk. Can I have the next one, please? Key recommendation 2 is basically focusing attention on the fact that we need to repurpose and redesign global institutions for the complexities of the 21st century. These institutions were set up in a very different era. And from that time till today, I think the world has moved on. We are living in a much more interconnected and interdependent world, which is based on digital technologies. And these institutions must adapt to these new and emerging contexts. So we believe that we need to create a system of more cooperative and responsive functioning of international organizations that are able to identify and redress key drivers of risk even before they manifest. And if they do manifest, they should be able to have a more coordinated response to such crises. What we saw in COVID-19 in the initial months was enormous focus on the World Health Organization and the weaknesses, in a sense, that we saw in there. But we realized soon enough that there were a number of other international organizations that should have responded much more quickly than they were able to do. I think it's also extremely important that the ongoing reform process of the United Nations and other international organizations needs to be completed. And we need to ensure that this institutional fragmentation that exists inside the UN and with other international organizations is bridged as far as possible. The vulnerability of the poor, and this is a theme that you will hear across several recommendations, the poor and the marginalized has to be addressed, and we need to be able to come up with innovative virtual webs of security so that they are protected to a much larger extent from the crises that we are likely to be facing. Next one, please. Key recommendation 3 moves from what we are talking about in terms of governance and what we need to do to how is it that we should really be achieving smarter, evidence-based, adaptive, good governance at all levels. And one of the first things that needs to be done to achieve this is to strengthen the science policy interface, which must be institutionalized, and creating robust, transparent, and accountable systems. It has to inform or must be informed by countries' contextual diversities and the socioeconomic sensitivities that exist in different countries. And the breadth and depth of this also of international cooperation amongst these institutions is essential for providing the advice that is needed. So it's not sufficient to just strengthen science policy interface in a few countries. This has to be done across countries and down to the local levels. And the capacities or capabilities in these organizations must be quite similar. We also need to ensure that the options for enhancing accountability and transparency include boosting stakeholder participation. And we also have to ensure that while we are seeing these mega trends of moving to smart cities, it must be accompanied by smart governance. We need to ensure that we have the high quality, reliable, real-time data that would allow us to respond to crises of different kinds. But it also has to be accompanied by a deep scientific understanding of the causal relationships, and of course, the ability to deploy this science in smart governance responses. So there are many things that are linked to each other that have to be done simultaneously, and I think we need to create the ethos by which we are able to address some of these challenges. Next, please. I should stop quickly, so I will speed over the next few recommendations. Key recommendation 4 stresses the importance of partnerships, and these partnerships are key to sustainable development. The spread of information technology, even though it is uneven, allows for the development of new tools of engagement, and we should be able to fast track the co-design and co-creation of alternative, more inclusive and sustainable world systems. We should be able to engage in deliberative societal dialogue, including the citizens, and use citizen science approaches much more intensively than we have done, and recognize the fact that the private sector is stretching its hand to collaborate with governments, with civil society, and find solutions. And I think this cooperation with the private sector is also extremely important. Next, please. Key recommendation 5 says it's not enough to just have science-based or evidence-based decision-making, but society itself must be an informed society. It must be a sustainable knowledge society. We need to be able to restore the trust in science, which has been eroded for a variety of reasons, but one of them also has to do with the fact that there is a plethora of fake news and conspiracy theories that are available, and we are not able to present a unified front as far as science is concerned. So several of these measures have to be addressed. Science systems must promote systemic understanding and also must be inclusive and accessible. Next, please. Key recommendation 6 is talking about the fact that we have an opportunity today to reset our economic infrastructure and the development paths that we have for greater sustainability. We need to move to a new globalization that has to be conceived and implemented. There is a step back from globalization, as we have seen in the past, and there is a much greater emphasis on contextual issues, on job creation, and many other local issues which we have not been able to deal with very effectively. So I think a new globalization, a conscious globalization, has to be undertaken. We have an opportunity also to redesign and repurpose our urban spaces. towards greater sustainable living and well-being. And I think all the changes that we saw from the response to COVID-19 point towards the fact that urban footprints can be reduced quite substantially if we were to engage in this activity. There are many other things that can be done in this sphere, but I think, again, it requires a very conscious and deliberative approach that has to be taken. Moving towards a services and sharing economy, again, can do an enormous amount to reduce consumption levels and reduce demand. And this area of activity for being able to reduce especially the greenhouse gas footprints is something that has not got adequate attention. Next, please. Key recommendation 7 is recognizing that sustainability and resilience have to be the new mantra for development. It's not just growth that we can talk about. We need to move away from the focus on growth to sustainability and resilience. We have seen the COVID-19 has held a mirror up to society as far as inequalities are concerned, and the growing inequalities and extreme vulnerability that we have will definitely stymie future growth. We have to recognize that nearly 70% of the world's population today is living with rising inequality in income and wealth terms. And I think with the uncertainties that we are facing and the extreme events, I think this will be a very vulnerable part of society that can bring entire societies down. Continued inequality is also leading to social tipping points. And I think we do need to broaden our understanding of human security to include systemic resilience. Can I have the next one, please? And the final recommendation that we have is basically recognizing the fact that there is a new consciousness in society that is visible to everyone to see, and we have to be able to harness this. Science-based policies need to encourage the accelerated lifestyle changes that we are seeing. COVID-19 has seen an unprecedentedly quick and rapid response in terms of lifestyles, in terms of altered household production parameters and daily food and other material consumption patterns. And I think it has shown to people that we can live our lives with a much lower degree of consumption. We also need to be able to see whether remote functioning can be supported through systemic changes in institutional frameworks and infrastructure, because this remote functioning also allowed a significant reduction in consumption and the footprints that this has resulted in. And finally, we end the report by calling for explicitly calling for energy demand reduction to be introduced as a target under SDG 7 in the Sustainable Development Goals, which focus on energy access, energy efficiency, and renewable energy, but energy demand reduction is kind of falling between the stools. So these are the 8 key recommendations that we have come up with. Can I have the next slide, please? And if my colleague Louis has joined us, which I'm not very sure if he was having some connection problems. But if not, then I will just conclude on his behalf. Basically, I think in a sense, what we are trying to say is that the transformative changes that we have recommended in this report represent the low-hanging fruit that require relatively low levels of investment, but have the power to result in far-reaching transitions. So we're talking about transitions themselves, but the transformative changes that will open the door to transformations over a period of time. The green shoots, as we have already seen and are seeing, will not sustain and will reverse very quickly if accompanying policy and regulatory frameworks do not support these green shoots. You must have seen a number of studies that have said that the impact on greenhouse gas emissions of COVID-19 is not as large as we had originally thought, but that is also because once the lockdown went away, we saw a reversal of some of these trends. But I think we really need to focus on the opportunities that came up rather than what actually happened and then went away. We have to be able to build resilience to multi-hazards and must have the capacity to harvest multiple dividends based on systemic analysis. And this has to pervade across all levels of governance. Finally, I think I'll just stop with this last comment, which says that identifying transformations within reach has to be a continuous effort. What we have embarked on in phase 1 is just a start. I think there are many more things that are evolving, that are revealing themselves as we are still grappling with COVID-19. And we have to be able to keep track of them. We have to be able to analyze them quickly with the agility that we spoke about. And we have to be able to reach out to the decision-making community and ensure that we use whatever opportunities are available to us to try and steer the world towards a great path of greater sustainability. So thank you very much. With that, I think I will conclude this presentation. Back to you, Charles.
Thank you very much, Lena. I think this was very insightful and inspiring. May I make use of the last few minutes that we have just to ask you one or two questions? First of all, you mentioned, of course, we talk about science here. What do you see as the role of science to come to these next steps that you've listed in your key recommendations? How do you think science can help to bring this about?
So there are a number of areas in which science can definitely help. The focus that we had in our discussions was on science systems, but I think there were a number of incentives that you will hear about in the science systems report that were identified right from along the entire science value chain, right from setting research agendas to be able to define the research problems and the incentive systems that we put in place so that we are able to look at the science-based solutions that we are coming up with in a systemic manner and that have the policy relevance and that are practical from an implementation point of view. So I think the science systems need to also refocus, at least in part. I'm not saying that the entire science system needs to move to this particular area, but they do need to have a significant chunk of their work to respond to the challenges that we are seeing and the immediate challenges that the world is facing.
Thank you. Then I see in the comments there's a question, and I think that might be the next step to what science needs to do. And how can we, and I think we're talking about we as the scientific community, but maybe also we as a general public, how can we challenge the political institutions to make sure we engage with systemic approaches rather than just black and white?
So the area of systemic science is been evolving over a period of time, but is still not as pervasive as it needs to be, and not in all countries for sure. I think in addition to looking at systemic science, there are transdisciplinary approaches that have to be integrated as well. Plus, I think, as I mentioned briefly in passing, it is critically important that science is able to present a unified front for policymakers in particular, because when science speaks in different voices, even if it is systemic science, then it becomes extremely challenging for the policymaking community to really be able to decipher the nuances and the multiple messaging that could be and often comes out from science. So I think putting in place the mechanisms by which we address ourselves to the entry points to systemic challenges in a unified manner, resolving nuances and differences between ourselves, I think is going to be very important for reaching out to the policymaking community and society and getting them to focus on a different approach to decision making.
Okay, and if you then look at, I think because of the pandemic, countries and governments tend to be looking more inward in a way because they want to deal with the pandemic on a local and country base, whereas science is maybe already broader because it in itself is a more international endeavor. Do you think science can use that to sort of fast forward looking into how we can build a sustainable future and influence the politics in the different countries to work together to come to a next step?
I think that's going to be a critical exercise for science to engage in. What we are seeing, of course, is a breaking down of the international order and a me-first approach that is not just heartbreaking, but is also makes ineffective whatever interventions are being done within countries. How do we resolve this? Did we partner adequately with the private sector in this case, because the vaccine solutions are coming out from there? Did we partner adequately with different spheres of science to be able to work better with science communication and getting the response from society? The breakdown that we are seeing in various countries of social order, again, I think results partly from the fact that both science and policy, and when I say science, I'm speaking about it in a much broader manner than medical science or health science, possibly vacillated quite a bit on the responses to COVID-19 and the kinds of impact that it was having and our response to those impacts itself. So that's where I think the systemic part of it becomes critically important. A very proactive engagement, not just active engagement, of the science community in a integrated manner was the need of the hour in every country of the world and in every city of the world. And I think we possibly were not prepared for this. And I think there is an opportunity for us to take a look at what went wrong and at least be better prepared for the next time.